Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of silent moments, looking at tracks that feature silence within the composition. Today we're going to be checking out a track from Regina Spektor. This one, interestingly, I couldn't find anywhere other than an unofficial upload on YouTube. We're looking at Songs, or possibly Songs is the album. Daniel Cowman, not quite sure. So, let's dive into this and see what Regina Spektor is bringing to the table today. Very dark, bit of dissonance, tons of tension. And, we're in 3/4 already, so it's a little odd. It's not symmetrical.
On the day that Daniel Cowman stopped existing, the
Cowman,
world
okay.
should have ended right then and there, precisely 4:15. When he stopped existing, the world should have ended. How could it go on? How could it go on? How could it go on when I don't exist? I don't exist. 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 So now that we got that straight, doesn't mean that I can fly, doesn't mean that I can go do whatever I want. Now that we got that clear, and you know that I'm not here, doesn't mean that I can go do whatever I please. The premature ejaculation of his death sentence hit Daniel in the face like a big round spitball. And everything got hazy in the courtroom, and then he stood up and then he sat back down another 2 times in a row. And everything got real slow like a gunshot in the movies. And he remembered heroin boy walking through the door, bouncing off the walls and the floor, taking off his belt, taking off his pants, filling up the bathtub, getting ready to go in for a swim, singing I don't exist, 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 I don't exist. So now that we got that straight, doesn't mean that I can fly, doesn't mean that I can go do whatever I want. Now that we got that clear, and you know that I'm not here, doesn't mean that I can go do whatever I please.
The jazzier chords here in the chorus in her melody line are such a strong juxtaposition to the spoken word in the verses.
The heroin boy walked through the door and he was screaming, and everyone's like, what you screaming, as if it's the end of the world. And he was like, well, it is. And I was sitting in the corner with my pants down. I was sure someone next door was blowing up balloons, and they was red and orange. And there was this one lady at the bar, and she was trying to buy gin. And this other lady at the bar, and she was trying to sell gin. It worked out good for the boths of them. And heroin boy started taking off his belt, started taking off his pants, started taking off his shoes, filling up the bathtub, getting ready to go in for a swim. I says, no, you're gonna drown. And he says, no, I can't drown, simply because a man destined to hang can never drown. A man destined to hang can never drown. A man destined to hang can never ever drown. A man destined to drown can never burn. A man destined to drown can never burn. A man destined to drown can never ever burn. A man destined to fry can never ever ever. A man destined to fry can never ever ever. A man destined to fry can never ever ever die in any other way but frying. Lucky that I'm dying by hanging and not drowning. So now that we got that straight, can't I just be left alone? I want to take a fucking bath.
Is it over? No, we still have a minute and 5 seconds left. Is this just a minute of silence at the end of the track? I'm gonna wager so. Huh. I was kind of hoping it led to something, anything, and it doesn't. Even a little one word at the end. I don't know, something to justify the silence. I can't think of anything that was leading up to it, I think, that would justify it either. I was loosely paying attention to the lyrics too, so I don't know. First thing I want to bring up, contrast. Contrast. There are two modes of operation in this track. There is a spoken word component that plays around with chromaticism and atonality, and a melodic section that focuses on consonant harmony and jazzier focus on melodic composition. Across those two sections, the contrast is primarily atonality and dissonance versus consonant harmony. Sorry, no, dissonance versus consonance, and atonality versus jazzier chord theory. And so, as we move between these two modes, we actually feel a shift on multiple levels. We feel a shift rhythmically, we feel a shift melodically, we feel a shift harmonically, chordally. And it creates these two very different ideas. I'm not sure if they mean anything yet. It could simply just be a way to break up the monotony of staying within a single style. I was trying to pick up what was being said at the times because it's a simple song. It's piano and vocals, and most of the piano lines are just one hand. It sounds like it doesn't feel like there's two hands going on at any of the moments here. So there's only two lines to listen to. It's one of the rare songs where I feel like I have the mental bandwidth to affordance to listen to the lyrics as well as the music, given that there's just not a lot going on at any one time. And like I said, I don't know that I could say specifically whether there was a narrative reason for the change of style. I think it was more of a delivery reason, just based off of this one listen, that like I said, just want to change things up from time to time in order to break up the monotony of staying with a single sound. So our verses tend to be a bit more free form in many ways. First of all, it's spoken word. It doesn't really apply too much to rhyme schemes or even rhythmic cadences or patterns. Even line to line, if we broke this up into stanzas, which I don't know how we could, but I'm sure somebody has when we go look at the lyrics. I'm sure it'll be broken up into stanzas. Um, I'm not thinking we're going to see too much similarities between the stanzas simply because it feels kind of off the cuff in some ways, like she's making it up as she goes. And I don't want people to confuse me saying that I think that's what she's doing, but she creates an illusion that that's what's going on. In fact, this entire song feels like it's made up on the fly. I think a lot of the sparse piano lines mixed with the heavy repetition in the lyrics and the lack of repeating phrases means that you never really have to remember what you did. You just keep pushing forward wherever your brain wants to go, stream of consciousness style. If this was improv, it would not surprise me. If it was not improvised, then memorizing this is even more difficult because there's like zero patterns to remember. There's nothing you can fall back on to say, oh, I already, memorized this part. I just have to do it again. Like, you have to, the whole song's new. You have to keep playing new things. You have to memorize the entire song rather than portions of the song. Um, but anyways, back on track. The whole spoken word thing. There's no adherence to rhythm. I mentioned that it's atonal. It doesn't really aim for pitches at any time, it seems. Um, Dissonance is not something that is an element to be avoided. The vocals and the piano line are consistently, well, one, there's just no intervals that are tense, but also out of tune. I don't know specifically if the piano itself was detuned for this performance, but she does have some vocal notes that she, I'm going to assume purposefully, leans into flatter or sharper variances, having a sort of microtonality to her vocal performance on this. It is lacking structure in so many ways. It is freeform exploration. It's one of the main components of it, and it is what leans me into feeling that there's a chance this might be completely improvised. However, this is juxtaposed with beautifully constructed choruses, where the piano tends to take up more of a flourishy sound rather than a background thing. I don't even know how to describe the piano work in most of the verse stuff, primarily because just, it's foundation, right? Its purpose is to sit under the vocals. But, like, what is it doing as a foundation? Is it providing harmonic structure? Is it providing chord progression? Uh, kind of, maybe. Sometimes our opening piano line was certainly an outline. We had rising and was it rising and falling, or was it just purely descent? And like you hit the bottom and then you just start back at the top and just I don't remember. But it was outlining the chords at the beginning, but I don't really remember it always doing that. Sometimes it felt like just random notes selected just to have musical sound under the vocals. And so again, sort of a formless thing, and it contrasts heavily with the chorus, which gives us these flourishy piano lines. In fact, I mentioned earlier, I think most of the piano lines were one-handed, but there was, especially during the first chorus, I don't remember about the second, with two-hand piano movement. And I think there was like a chords in the left hand, moving in the right hand kind of idea going on at one point. It's just structured. It feels like it was pre-composed. It feels more fleshed out, and that it has more traditional purpose for a accompaniment instrument to a main one, to the vocals. The vocal line also has pitches that are complementary to what the piano is doing, sometimes with tension, but sometimes with resolution and consonance as well. And I think that's kind of the word right there, complementary. It's not necessarily just that in the verse that there's tension and sometimes tonality dissonance coming from the two instruments. It's just that they don't complement each other. They seem to be two separate things smashed together. They just happen to be playing at the same time rather than two ideas designed to be played at the same time. And, again, it's all intended in one way or another, but the feeling of it as I'm listening, does it sound like it was intended to be played together? Do they complement each other? And in a traditional sense, the verse doesn't, but the chorus does. And it's just another layer that we find this contrast between the two sides. Um, Speaking on the side of tonality and harmony, the vocals in the chorus have this jazzy thing going on. She has these really spicy notes that she pulls out every once in a while. A lot of it does feel like it's closer to that singer-songwriter pop style where it's very harmonious, palatable music, but occasionally she has some interesting sounds that she likes to explore outside of the typical vocabulary for pop music. But here, I think she's just straight up exploring like swing ideas. Um, and it's phenomenal because it really stands out. I mean, that's the whole thing of contrast is to make certain sounds more like that sound. And I always use the volume thing. If you want your 10 volume to feel loud, you need to showcase what quiet is. And if you're always quiet and then you hit that loud, it's going to sound louder. It's going to feel more than 10 because you've been at quiet for such a long time. And so here we have the free form, the atonality for so long that the jazzy harmonies actually feel ridiculously harmonious. it's it's a rare moment when you're just like, wow, that's what I've been missing out. Um, and it really is a big moment when on so many levels things begin to click and connect in ways that they sort of struggled to do earlier. And of course the struggling is more of a narrative perspective on it. Of course I'm going to assume this all is how Regina wanted it to be. Now, aside from that contrast, there's a couple of things I wanted to focus on specifically with her vocals. One that I've already talked about is the atonality and the intonation things, where she specifically leans into notes that are flatter or sharper than they should be and tend to be a bit dissonant against what the piano's doing, even if the interval is not creating tension. She really loves to lean into that a few times in her spoken word parts, but there's also I don't know if I want to call it playfulness because this is not a playful song. It seems heavy in most situations, but she has a very wide variety of vocal inflections, and it creates a fun environment of kind of how is she going to deliver this next idea. She utilizes heavy use of vocal fry throughout this. And that's just it's just the crackles and pops that you can make. There's one section, she was just repeating the phrase over and over and over, and the first syllable was just this really punchy, accented, almost sforzando idea, which is where you hit the note really loudly and then bring the volume back down. Technically, a sforzando also brings the volume back up, so it's like a ba and you kind of get this initial sting and then a swell into it, but she gets the sting and then brings it down a little bit, sometimes getting it back up, which we'll discuss in a second, but not technically in a proper sforzando idea. Um, but yeah, she hits it and it's like all fry until she gets to the next syllable, which is it's an interesting choice, and it began to grate on me. I think it would have been fine as a single concept, second or third time through, but by like the seventh repetition, I was like, okay, this is grating, and maybe it's supposed to be. I don't know. But on the topic of swells, we hear a lot of them. If you listen to just the opening verse, everything about it feels odd. It is delivered as spoken word, semi into the realm of rapping, but it's also done in a sing-songy way that she plays around with volume and swelling and projection and placement of sound in so many different ways that while it is spoken word, I don't think there's any way we could describe it otherwise. She employs so many musical elements to it that it feels like it's trying to be melodic simultaneously, and it kind of ends up failing at both and seeming alien in so many regards because nobody messes with pitches that way. It's a very musical thing to phrase ideas in those manners. When it comes to spoken word, when it comes to speech, we have mannerisms for that are totally divorced from musical ideas, and she kind of does them both simultaneously in a way that sounds like sing-songy stuff but isn't, and is certainly spoken word but doesn't quite come off that way either. It's this weird middle ground of engaging both the melodic type of vocalizing and a speech type of vocalizing simultaneously that just it's odd. And that's, I think, is certainly the purpose of it, but I do think it's important to bring it up because she chose to do this and it is unusual. And it's very possible that some of that plays into what she wanted this to sound like, the themes she's exploring lyrically. I'm still not really quite sure. Once again, though, it's juxtaposed heavily when she goes into a very traditional singing style with very clear phrasing, clear enunciation of sound, always going for a very melodic and beautiful delivery. It's just a very, very contrasty thing going on. It's a massive schism between the two sounds, I suppose, is really the big takeaway here. And then the silence. I still don't know what the silence means. Like that's the big thing there. I don't know. I'm gonna hit some lyrics. We'll see if we can't wrap any of this up. Um, I'm intrigued though. I've always found Regina's music to be intriguing. Every time that we've listened to her, I'm like, I need to check out more from her. She just does things in a way that are a bit unusual while still sticking into that status quo of that generic-y singer-songwriter vibe. And I know like that singer-songwriter is not generic. It's like basically if you write songs and sing them, you get lumped in here. And there is like a general sound, I think, that encompasses a lot of it, but just because you listen to one singer-songwriter doesn't mean you'll enjoy another. It's not like heavy metal where you kind of know what each band's doing. They might have their own little unique elements, but they're all working within the same mold for like 80% of it. But there's something very, I don't know. I don't like singer-songwriter as a genre name. I think it describes the process of the music, not the sound of it. But at the same way, like it kind of does. When I say that she's a singer-songwriter, you kind of get like an idea in your head. You put her in the same box as other singer-songwriters who write similar kinds of music. I don't know. There's a foundational thing here, and I wish I could explain it. But she dances outside the box just enough to put her own spin on it. And this is just a reminder that I need to dig into her works. Okay, lyrics. So, as I'm reading this, y'all know I kind of take lyrics a little too much on face value and a little too seriously. And as I'm reading through this, I reached a point somewhere around, I suppose, stanza 15 or 16 when I just kind of gave up. I just this doesn't make sense. I threw my hands up. I was like, there's just no purpose for some of this, and most of it doesn't really mean anything. And then I sort of something kind of clicked at the very end, and I think there's a sarcastic side to this. I don't want to say that this is a comedy song in particular, but the ending does seem to be a little bit of a punchline. It almost feels like the whole song is leading up to that final last question. Can I just be left alone? I want to take a bath. It has a little bit of British humor in it, I suppose, given that the whole song is seemingly about death and this main character dying in a bath and going back to tell himself not to do it, not to take the bath. And he's like, I'm gonna take it anyways. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. But like there's also these random non sequiturs. At the end, well, where do I even start? Okay, so like here's the thing, I think, is that our main character dies in a bathtub. He drowns. The main character is referred to as both as Daniel and the heroin kid. So maybe they overdosed, or maybe they just were too intoxicated, too high to know they were drowned. I don't know. Anyways, it doesn't come up. Like, there isn't any point where they take drugs in the music, in the lyrics, but he is referred to as the heroin boy many times. Um, he dies, and he goes to, I don't know, afterlife court. Randomly, he's just in a courtroom, and he's kind of real stunned by a lot of things. It's kind of all over the place, but bear with me here. By the end of the track, though, he busts through the door on himself, presumably on the day he's about to drown, and says, "What are you screaming for?" As if it's the end of the world. And he says, "Well, it kind of is." And then we switch to the main character, which I think is the Daniel that's alive right now, getting ready to take a bath. And he says, "I was sitting in the corner, and I was sure someone next door was blowing up balloons. They were red and orange," which I think is weird because, like, you say you're sure, but, like, you can't see them. So how do you know they're red and orange? And, like, that's an odd little fact. Like, why put that line in there? But then the next one says there was a lady at the bar trying to buy gin, and this other lady at the bar trying to sell the gin, and, it kind of worked out good for the both of them. And, like, what? I mean, between the courtroom case, which, I mean, it's not even really much of a thing. It just says everything got hazy in the courtroom. And so I stood up and sat back down, did that a couple of times, and then everything got real slow like. And then we go to our first memory of Ghost Daniel moving into the bathroom and watching real Daniel get ready to get in, singing I Don't Exist. And just it's just a bunch of fever dream. I don't know. But at one point, the idea of destiny comes in, and Ghost Boy, Ghost Daniel says, "You're gonna drown. Don't get in the bathtub." And Real Daniel says, "I can't drown. I'm destined to be hung." Stating, "A man destined to hang can never drown. And a man destined to drown can never burn. And a man destined to fry can never ever die in any other way than frying. How lucky it is that I'm dying by hanging and not by drowning." The idea of fate and destiny here being presented as they are, which feels once again a bit sarcastic, knowing, presumably, that Daniel is so sure of his death that he's going to take this bath and possibly end up drowning. Again, that final line then, "Can I just be left alone to take a bath?" feels sort of like a punchline. It has that dreary, dark, tongue in cheek sarcasm that I sort of associate with the dryness of British humor. This dude is being told how he's going to die, and he says, "There's no way. So let me just do this." Famous last words, I suppose. I don't I'm more confused now than I was before. And having again all of these repeated lines. At one point she says, "And he started remembering and remembering and remembering and remembering and remembering." The idea singing "I don't exist." She says that 12 times. "I don't exist. I don't exist." Actually, over the course of the whole song, it's probably closer to 20. It feels stream of consciousness. And maybe it was just written that way. She just wrote out her thoughts on a notebook and then made no alterations and decided these were going to be the lyrics. But there's also an avant garde, made up on the fly, nothing's really connectedness in the piano part as well that really makes this whole thing feel created on the go, completely improvised in one take, possibly even. I don't know. If someone has any insight into that, let me know. Particularly regarding is this pre-composed or not, and I guess to what level of pre-composition is done. Because like nothing is truly made up on the fly. It's all based off of ideas and premises you've done before. But was this pre-written and meticulously recorded, or was this sort of just I got this stuff. Let me play it out, and then we just take the first take and throw it on a CD. I don't know. This is an interesting track, and the silence at the end, I think, doesn't really work well because the song really should end with the punchline there. Now, punchline's a weird word for it because it's not funny, but it's comedic. It's the irony and sarcasm that I feel. When did this come out? I think that's a good question. February of 2002. It does have a very 90s thing going on with it. And at the very beginning of the 2000s, I think, is fitting. I probably would have guessed 98, but '02 kind of fits. Those are my thoughts. Uh, I'm really looking forward to the comments on this one. I think this is going to spark some really interesting conversation, and hopefully, like I said, some of the questions I had, there's been answers. Maybe she's done interviews or something. Liner notes for this album. I don't know. I need more context on this one. So if you have that, throw it down in the comments. You can also give me your thoughts, opinions, perspectives, any of that. Let me know. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have one more track today that's going to wrap up our theme of silent moments. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to check out some brand new music. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.